Awesemo. Here we go. It is the NFL live before lock, Monday Night Football, an amazing barn burner here. We have the New England Patriots at the New York Jets. Do we have anybody healthy? I'm not sure, but I'm joined once again by Kyle Dvorchak at Kyle Tweets here on Twitter. Kyle, the game went exactly opposite of how we said it would yesterday. The touchdowns were correct. They were spread out to everybody, like we said, but there was no consolidation of production with Michael Thomas and with Alvin Kamara.
Dude, it was tilting. And it happens. And, we just move on. Yeah, I was talking about, the concentration there, like you talked about, is so dense on Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara that why would you deviate from those guys? I don't know. Apparently so you can play Josh Hill and Taysom Hill and all these other guys. So I don't know. You get hit on the chin sometimes. As long as you can look at a long-term sample of your work and see that you're making plus EV decisions, you get back on the mat, you keep going. And if you're not making plus EV decisions, you make changes. And so I think, it's definitely a data point to consider, but it's just one data point. So tough scene, but we fight on.
Yeah, the changes I think we got to make. We saw it tweeted by fearless leader Alex Baker this morning. He said, I wish I had known to not play injured players. That's the key to success, or players that are going to get hurt. Goodness. That was just a mess of a day yesterday. The bankroll took a hit. It was getting kicked in the teeth. I'd finally clawed my way back to my pre-debacle from about a month ago, was back to nice profitability, and now I've got to scale the mountain once again, Kyle. This is very sad. What is your biggest takeaway from last night's game as a reminder that this is just all a one-game sample size, but how we address and build things? Because tonight we're looking at like 95+% Cam Newton between flex and captain, and then on FanDuel same way. Seeing that things can go askew as they did last night, how do we want to protect? This is like the biggest leverage play we'll ever have, but it's also just the most insane one. What do we do?
Yeah, I love it. I think maybe the biggest takeaway from last night is to not lean too heavily on Vegas, or at least understand where the public becomes confident in Vegas, because obviously the Vegas lines are more efficient than you or I could ever guess. You and I, understanding a lot more than the public about football on our own without doing any advanced modeling, could never essentially beat Vegas. So understand that Vegas is both incredibly efficient, and the margin of error for them is that when they are wrong, they can be wrong by a lot. In fact, they can be wrong. I saw somewhere, I don't even know if this is true, it's like the largest spread differential of the season. I'm not sure if that's true. It might be, or maybe it was the largest margin of defeat of the season, which would both be insane because those are two very good teams. It's amazing to see one of those teams get crushed so badly. So understand that while Vegas is incredibly efficient, the public could be waiting not only Vegas's efficiency, but they might not even know that Vegas, had Tampa Bay as favorite, and might just intuitively sense that Tampa Bay was the better team and really go heavily on those Tampa Bay lineups, and understand that while, yes, Tampa Bay probably, if you play that game X many of times, wins a majority of those times, that if the public overstates that, there's always leverage to be had. And it rolls perfectly into, while, yes, the Jets are almost certainly going to lose this game based on the line, does that mean there is it is bad leverage to try and get off of Cam Newton in the Millie Maker on DraftKings? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I think that is probably the perfect way to kick off, is understanding that last slate there was not a near certainty, but a large favorite, at least in terms of how the public played the DraftKings lobby in the Tampa Bay lineups, and that can go awry so quickly. And the same thing can be said for tonight, where Cam Newton, as the obvious number one scorer on the slate, Jamison Crowder coming in as number two, but maybe even a distant number two, Cam Newton is both a great play and a great way to find leverage off the field, specifically in these giant contests.
All right, that's going to kind of set the stage for us here. Free article or free item for tonight is the single game ownership projections. Keys to the kingdom are yours, gamers. They can also be yours for every single Showdown slate, primetime Showdown slate, that is. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of love there coming up on Thanksgiving, which is just a couple weeks away. But use no promo code. It's the NFL Express package, $3.95 a week. You get everything but main slate, ownership, and players projections. That's it. You get everything else. You get the premium articles. You get the all the Showdown ownership, all the Showdown projections, grades. You get the probability tools. Everything is yours, plus Slack. Come on. You got to do this. $1.30 a slate. It's the only way to go. We're also brought to you by No House Advantage. We'll talk about those guys in a little bit, but we are going to get started here now that we have a collection of people appearing. Let's start this off right. Spread's been bouncing around a little bit. Last I saw it was bouncing between 9.5 and 10. I'm assuming it's still somewhere right around there. Coming in here, we have a 41.5 over under at quarterback. This will be the fourth game for Cam Newton returning from the COVID list. Other than his monster game against Seattle, monster 397 passing yards, 44 attempts, he has not had more than 175 yards through the air. That feels bad. However, 5 of his 6 games, he's had 47 or more rushing yards. I believe he has 6 rushing touchdowns in those 7 total games. So that's been pretty nice. On the flip side, we've got the New York Jets, who have allowed every opposing quarterback, with the exception of Phillip Rivers, to get multiple touchdowns. Now, I forget who it was now. One of them had to throw one and ran one in. It might have been Kyler Murray's popping into mind. It might have been him. But everybody else, all quarterbacks outside of Phillip Rivers, have accounted for multiple touchdowns. One did it, one passing and through the air. What do you want to do here with Cam? What is the best example I can think of? Like leg wrestling, where you line back and you lock legs and flip, and then somebody ends up doing a somersault. That's what this feels like, the sort of leverage. But it feels like Cam is this gigantic sumo wrestler, and we're the proverbial, 98-pound weakling that lives in our mom's basement and talks about fantasy sports.
Yeah, we're fighting an uphill battle. We're fighting an uphill battle trying to find leverage on Cam Newton, because his rushing ability makes him just such a stone cold lock to be at some point in the optimal line. Because even if he has a terrible night, like you've said, we're looking at 40 plus rushing yards a game for Cam Newton, and the touchdowns have been there as a rusher as well. So we're fighting an uphill battle trying to find leverage on Cam Newton. Right now, looking at our top Showdown and single game plays tool, it actually does come in as maybe even a slight positive lean if you put him in the captain, although that is only before adjusting for his salary. When you look at his salary, maybe people are overweighting the extent that Cam Newton should be in the captain spot. And I kind of lean with that salary-weighted top percentage, odds, essentially. That right now, we have 23% chance that based on his salary, he is the top play of the slate. Captain ownership at 36%. When you look at just his odds of being the top scoring overall player, it's actually above 36%. So it seems like people are somewhere in the right ballpark. It is simply the price. Do you adjust for the price, or do you say that he is just so much better than that it doesn't matter what price he is? I tend to think, especially on a slate where we're going to see upwards of almost 40% of the field, 2 out of every 5 players are going to be on one person. I'm not saying I'm baiting him, but I think I will end up coming in lower than the field on Cam at captain, because you talked about it. He's been bad. He's simply been bad. One game above 175 yards. And that was against probably the worst passing defense them and Dallas, I think, are probably the 2 teams. One of the worst 2 passing defenses. And I think by yardage allowed, Seattle's actually the worst. Easiest matchup you could possibly find. And of course he goes off. Other than that, been terrible. He's also averaging 2 sacks a game. He has more interceptions alone, let alone adding in a handful of fumbles, only 1, I believe, lost. He has more interceptions than touchdowns. And he got benched in 1 game that I think Jared Stidham came in and threw another touchdown. If you were to say, give him credit for that, you see a lot of turnovers, a decent amount of sacks, and not a lot of yards. I think if I'm looking at Cam Newton in the largest field tournaments, obviously in small field tournaments, I think it's fine to play him in captain. At the largest field tournaments, I think I'm probably going under the field on him at captain, because there is so much leverage in playing some of these Jets players where, of course, Jets are projected to score less points. They're a downright terrible offense. But when you look at a guy like Jamison Crowder, who posted back-to-back-to-back 100-yard games, when you look at a guy like Denzel Mims, who's coming in, I believe, 10 targets in his past 2 games, at least 42 yards in both those games, and has a deep ADOT with a quarterback who is not very good, but he does throw deep at an above average rate. There are some outs to other players becoming the top captain. And if you do end up getting a game where one of those players is the top captain, in the milling maker per se, you are just canning 40% of lineups. The lineups that have Cam at captain, and if he has not even a terrible game, but just a game where he ends up being better used in the flex, even if it's not just, not fading him outright, but if it's a better use in the flex game where Denzel Mims gets a long catch for a touchdown, you're killing 40% of lineups. So I think the leverage you gain there is so incredibly immense. Yeah, I'm probably fading Cam at captain, which is unfortunate. And it's only in the highest field entries, because I think at the low stakes you can get away with playing the popular captain. I'm looking at some Crowder. I'm looking at some Mims. I think you could potentially get to the Cam receivers even. And one I'll throw out because we talked about it so much. Do you think, I know we're getting into the weeds already, could you play either defense? I was talking about the Jets, but certainly the Patriots are in contention. Can you play defensive captain on this slate in large field tournaments?
Yes. However, let's go counterpoint on that fact. I want to point out yes, I am old. I am your old pal. When my next milestone birthday happens, I will officially be your old pal. And yes, Kyle and I have the largest age disparity of anybody. He is half my age or less than. So there you go. All right. Now that we've taken care of that, reminder, we've got some free content here for you. It is the single game, single game ownership projection. So let me drop that in there. I'm sure Nightbot has already gotten to me, but let's put this over here. 99.3% Cam Newton on DK and 99.7% on FanDuel. That is where the projections stand now, folks. If you want to be a little different, play him in the flex or don't play him. Here is my counterpoint for the New England defense, for not playing the New England defense. The Jets have allowed at least 3 sacks or more in 5 of their 8 games, but New England has only 10 sacks on the season. That's the 4th fewest in the year. They do have almost 2 takeaways per game, which is top third of the league, but that's not great. So this is not quite the same Patriots defense that was there before. As much as we like to rip on Joe Flacco, let us not forget he is a Super Bowl winner. He is a very capable NFL quarterback. He just has not had good teams around him, well, pretty much since that Super Bowl run, and that was basically a defense that was around him. They have the Jets have an incredibly shaky offensive line right now. They really have no downfield threats that can get open because everybody's pretty young. Them getting open, Flacco having the time and hitting them, you're betting on 3 things to be right. And that's going to be really, really hard. But I still don't see Flacco getting sacked in abundant amount, 3 or 4 maybe, 1 or 2 turnovers. I don't think they're a bad play, but we're paying the appropriate price for them. The other thing I'm going to say about this is I think people are going to have stars in their eyes because they did see the Patriots on single game slates last year. I believe you have cited this a few times. They were the winning captain 2 different times. One of those was at least a 2 touchdown game. And I forget the other one, but I think it was like they allowed 3 points or something like that and had like 1 defensive touchdown. So you need the big plays, the splash plays, the pick six, the scoop and score. Are we going to get that? I don't know. It feels like we're asking for a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It is. I think they were the only team last year to have multiple defense captain wins, and obviously, it like some teams don't get on primetime slates as much. So there's like an obvious amount of selection bias there. But even if you included the main slates, like they were a team that even on the regular full Sunday slates, that like I think a lot of sharp people would just fade them at like 3.8K or whatever, and just get dunked on when they scored 2 times. So even if you like account for the fact that obviously like if New England gets on more primetime slates, they're more likely to have a defense captain. They were the only multi-defense captain on Showdown slates, obviously, team last year. And I think there was either 3 or 4, and there were at least half of them. So obviously their defense, and I think maybe some of it is talent. Obviously they're lacking some of the talent we saw last year tonight without, I believe, their top corner, without some players who opted out at the beginning of the season. They still have probably one of the best, if not the best defensive minds in the past 20 to 30 years, if not the history of the NFL and Bill Belichick. So I do think they're an interesting captain, and it probably makes at least sense at like maybe going all in at captain or pulling all the way back and not playing them because the range of outcomes is so spiky. They're not at least as far as things go, like a ceiling outcome is like a multi-touchdown or at least a touchdown game. And then if they don't get that is so many points that come off the board. They're not a wide receiver that can build a solid PPR floor. They're not a running back who could, have 20 carries. So their range of outcomes looks kind of like binomial, not exactly, but it is maybe more so than a running back per se. On the other side, I think the Jets are in play. I think the Jets defense is in play. This game is a low scoring game. They're facing, frankly, a quarterback who's just looked pretty bad. Looked like taking a lot of sacks, or at least a decent amount of sacks. It was a 4-sack game on the board. Like I said, he's turned it over more times than he's thrown touchdowns, adding those rushing touchdowns, and that's not quite the case. But man, I mean, they've rattled off, I believe, 4 straight losses now, and they probably, I believe, lost the 5th one as well. That wasn't with Cam Newton, but Cam Newton alone, 4 straight losses. I don't hate the Jets defense either in the flex or in captain. I know the spread is awfully negative looking towards them, but we saw that is not the end all be all. And if you're going to get 98% of lineups or 96, 90 even percent of lineups playing the quarterback of one team, especially if there are outs to them failing, like, I don't know if I'm feeling good about playing a defense running into Patrick Mahomes. He's incredible. Is Cam Newton incredible? No, obviously he's not incredible. He's played quite poorly. So I think Jets defense is a super interesting leverage spot, only for large field tournaments. But frankly, given the way we've seen Cam Newton play, they're in play. Patriots defense, more of kind of a tournament. It's surprisingly almost more of a tournament play because their price is so difficult to palate.
All right, let me hit on the inactives here. I've seen somebody keeps talking about Sony Michel. He's not playing. He was activated from the injured list, which means he is able to practice with the team now. They have 21 days. I think they're 17 days into it. They have 21 days to activate him or release him, I think is kind of how it works. It's a relatively new rule. They either instituted it this year or some form of it last year. But basically what they're trying to do is give the teams more flexibility to, if someone's really hurt, put them on the injured reserve, but you don't have to put them on the PUP list, which was so restrictive. Teams didn't want to do that, and it's not good. They knew there was going to be a lot of attrition. This is a really tough sport, so they're trying to adjust the rules a little bit, kind of like the baseballs, went from the 15-day injury list to the 10-day. They're just trying to sort of change with the times, make it a little safer for the players. So while he was activated from the you can't practice list, he has not been activated tonight at all. So other players that are out, Stephon Gilmore, may have been buried a little bit. He's their great cornerback. None of these are surprises. N'Keal Harry's out with concussion. Lawrence Guy is out. Dalton Keene, that's a little bit of a surprise. Patriots only have one tight end right now, and it's Izzo. Not that Izzo that got the Rona today, as it was announced. Different Izzo, different sport, but there you go. We bring you everything here at Awesemo. For the Jets, Sam Darnold, no surprise, still has a sore throwing shoulder that's cost him a couple games throughout the year. Frickin' Sam Ficken, he's not going to play either. It's Castillo. I believe Sergio Castillo is going to be their backup kicker. He's already kicked for them a couple times this year. And then Vincent Smith, but we knew he was going to be out. So no real surprises on that one. I do want to loop back. They're saying, hey, talk about tight ends. I believe it's tight end because it's just Izzo here. So Ryan Izzo he's going to play a lot. Let's see. Last week, he was the only tight end that saw the field because Devin, and I can't say I'll butcher his name.
Is it just Asi?
Asi, perhaps. Yes. It's Asi. And Matt Lacoste, they're both out. So Dalton King was the only other tight end on the roster. He's inactive tonight. Izzo has 15 targets on the whole season. Keene has 1. That's for the entire position. So Cam Newton doesn't really go to the time. Cam Newton is not really going to throw. 25, like if you set the over-under for me, I'd say 23 and a half attempts feels about right. If they can run the ball, they're just going to run the ball. This is where it gets a little scary. So that's that one. I just don't. He's fine. I would probably choose to play him over Gunnar Olszewski.
No, I think you've got it. I think it's Olszewski. That one's hard. Asi, you could kind of sound out. Olszewski is just a mess of Scrabble points. But I think you've got it. As far as I know, it's Olszewski.
All right. So he will probably play 60, 70% of the snaps. I don't think he even had a target last week.
No.
But he's also probably going to be their kick returner, both punt and kick returns. So that one makes it a little tricky as well, because we already know he's not going to pass. So one thing I wanted to hit here on the running backs. So the last 3 weeks, these are snap counts. So everybody thinks, it's Damian Harris. It's Damian Harris. Rex Burkhead. This is going from week 6, 7, and 8. So the most recent is going to be the last number I read. Burkhead, 32, 48, 49%. James White, 54, 19, 48%. Damian Harris, 21%, 40%, and 31%. Last week, he had, 16 carries. He only played 20 snaps. Let's be careful when you're starting to read some of the numbers, because we like to talk about target share and running share and all of that. He got the ball on 16 of his 20 plays. That's pretty impressive. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the way going forward. So just be careful on that one. And then Jacob Johnson has played He'll play about 30% of the time, probably more tonight because they only have one tight end. I could see them running more two running backs, and he'll be there. I think he has like 2 carries on the year and like 2 targets or something like that. It's sort of a non-entity, but the perfect Belichick troll. We have a super chat here from The Game is Rigged. I'm going to throw this one over to you. The question is Berrios and Pirine, or Crowder and Pirine. So we're going to eliminate Pirine, and we're going to say Berrios or Crowder. They're very redundant for each other. I think it's Berrios that's going to lose out. I would play Crowder. He is my number 2 guy behind Cam Newton. That should be everybody's number 2 guy behind Cam Newton.
Yeah, there's not really even a close call for me. I mean, unless you're just making an argument that you'll get less ownership, which you obviously will, but Berrios will be a backup player. He literally plays the exact same role as Crowder and does it to a lesser extent, whereas Crowder back-to-back 100-yard games, like every single game over double-digit targets this year. Like, unless he gets re-injured, I don't know if we even see almost Berrios take the field, because he is simply, I think they use him as a 1-for-1 replacement of Crowder when Crowder is inactive. Obviously, Crowder is not inactive. So, I mean, no real reason for me to go to Berrios. And like, even if you were to like play them together, like independent of the question of each other, I think like you can get more different by playing Olszewski or Denzel Mims. I don't really have much Berrios at all tonight because I think he just sits on the bench as long as Crowder is healthy.
And that's sort of the route I'm taking. Jeff Smith, kind of an afterthought as well, with everybody healthy. I wanted to look here because we're going to talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage. It is the newest form of DFS. It is player props. Why is it No House Advantage? Because we are not playing the house. We're going against other gamers. So what we do is we look at the different questions that they ask us of player props. So a game like tonight, they'll probably have 30 or 40 questions about tonight's game. So how it works is you choose 5 of them. You pick over or under, whatever their line is. These are static lines. They do not move. So if there's injury, weather, something else changes, they're not going to move them. That means the field may respond accordingly, but it's something that you don't have to keep looking back at. The nice thing is we have it set up here with the Awesemo projection probability of the various things happening. So for instance, tonight, the Cam Newton interception line on No House Advantage is half of an interception. Would you like to go over or under, knowing that Awesemo is projecting them for 0.88 or 88% chance of 1 interception tonight?
Yeah, I like to hear that I'm on the on Alex's side of this projection. But yeah, Cam Newton has just been throwing interceptions kind of left and right, and like that has even been on like low volume. On the off chance that the Jets keep it in play, you are looking at a very good chance of interception. So I think on 23 attempts, you don't feel great about betting the over, but like that is quite in the middle range of outcomes. If somehow the Jets keep it close, you feel great about betting the over. So I think more often than not, like the outcome looks like an over projection here. So yeah, I agree with our projections completely. I would slam the over on that one.
All right. So again, you guys play head-to-head 50-50s, play against your friends, play have GPPs, guaranteed prize pool tournaments. If you sign up using the promo code Awesemo, they will give you $20 deposit match up to your first $20. And if you refer a friend, they'll give you another $5 in site currency available for immediate use. That will come out into the contest first. That is No House Advantage. They do have a website, as does everybody, and a very slick app. So you want to check that out. Let's transition. Here's one more for you. Joe Flacco, 215.5 passing yards. Kyle, do you want to go over or under as we transition to the Jets?
Yeah, I have a slight lean towards the under. This Jets offense has been absolutely atrocious, and it kind of hasn't mattered which quarterback they've had. I mean, both have been absolutely terrible. I don't think Joe Flacco is that good. Do I think Sam Darnold is that good? Obviously, like not too much either. And they still face, although a defense missing some of its talent, one of the better scheme defenses in the league. And the total on this game indicates, and their implied team total on this game indicates that, unless they, run hot on yardage and cold on touchdowns, they're not going to be putting up many points, which correlates well with yardage. So I'll take the under here as well. It's a low total, and I still find myself leaning towards the under because this Jets offense is just like a vomit team.
All right. The Awesemo projections, which, again, this is just all laid out nicely here for you. They also say take the under. We have them for 191.77 yards. That is a 15% differential. So you'll want to take advantage of that one. I see the boss man is in the chat. He's a man of the people. He's out there in front of the YouTube wall. where else are you going to get this? Number one gamer in the world talking to us, giving us updates on his projections. I always like to tell a story, Kyle. When I first started working here, I noticed some little errors or stuff here and there in the projections, right? When they first come out early in the week, and you and I are writing primetime games, which are on the margins, and not everybody's looking at them. And you're like, oh, it's a little off or whatever. And I say, oh, I noticed this. Who should I reach out to? And they're like, oh, send a message to Alex. I'm like, no. We need someone to fix the projections. They're like, no, Alex actually runs the projections and posts them. I'm like, oh, snap. These really are his projections. So there you go. And now he's in front of the paywall chatting with us. He has a very aggressive take there on James White. I don't know that I agree. I'm leaning a little more towards Rex Burkhead. I also like the savings on DK for that, but I'm also not the number one ranked gamer in the world. There we go. You know who's not the number one ranked game in the world? It is Joe Flacco. Since their week 5 bye, the Patriots have not allowed a passing touchdown, and they have 5 interceptions. Now, that's 3 games facing Josh Allen, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Drew Lock, but that's still pretty impressive. This year, New York is averaging 155.9 passing yards per game, which is 20 less than the Ravens and 35 less than the Patriots. Those are the bottom 3 teams in the league. They have 4 passing touchdowns. This is like playing Danny Dimes every week, except Danny Dimes has twice as many touchdowns now as the Jets do, and he's still pretty darn bad. They have 7 interceptions as well. I went deep. Let's see, did it make the cut? Do you know how many times in his last 35 starts that Joe Flacco has 15 or more fantasy points? Sorry, his last 14 games with at least 25 pass attempts. How many times has he topped 15? So basically, his time now with the Jets, it's his whole time with the Jets, I believe.
His time with the Jets, you said last 14 games with 25?
With at least 25. I didn't
see.
So
that's time with the Broncos too, I'd imagine?
Yes, that was. It's over 2.5 seasons. Thank you, yes.
2?
Close, 3.
Okay. I knew it couldn't be a lot, and apparently he's impressing me with still a downright terrible number. Jesus. God,
We're paying like he is a reasonable fantasy quarterback. He is a functional starting NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
But I don't know about fantasy quarterback. That's horrible. And I had to maneuver the number. I could have gone back. I was saying more than 20 fantasy points, and I could go back like 35 games. But then I thought, well, no, that doesn't sound, well, whatever. What if you had a bunch of 17, 18, 19? No, 15. And most of those where he didn't have 15 were single digits. It's been bad, folks.
He's bad.
That said, he still comes in as my number 5 player because he's going to have the ball in his hands on every play, at least. What is your overall approach with Flacco and lineup construction tonight? I don't think he's a must. Is he a pivot, sort of a replacement from Newton? Because him getting 220 yards and 2 touchdowns is not out of the question at all. And that would probably have him as the 2nd or 3rd raw points guy on the slate, assuming nobody caught both touchdowns.
Yep, I think you laid it out perfectly. He is this ugly, quite miserable pivot off of a Newton, or you could play him with Newton. The thing is, for a starting quarterback, even if he's not good, he's not that expensive. So you can afford to get him in. But that's all he is. He's a vote on the idea that a starting quarterback in the NFL should be rostered probably at a certain rate in Showdown. And because he has this awful and deservedly so stink around him, that he's going to be owned at less than that rate. And I think that's really the only reason you get interested in playing him, whether it be at captain, which I'm not doing, or at flex, which I think is more viable, is that people just underrate the fantasy potential of a starting quarterback. And that's about it, because I don't see a great ceiling probability from him. Our top stacks tool is like incredibly low on him for the context of him being a quarterback. It's so funny to see like a quarterback. We're talking about he's our 5th best play. He's a freaking quarterback. Quarterbacks score more than almost any other, they score more than any other position on any given slate. They should score more than almost any other player except for the one receiver that goes off. And we still have him. We're saying, 4, 5, 6, whatever. So it's quite disappointing. This Jets team is terrible. I think he is simply just a leverage play in tournaments. I don't think he projects quite well. The only reason I have some of him is because I do think he throws deep at one of the highest rates in the league, which is interesting. He's not very good at it, but it does give him some potential correlation with a Perriman or a Mims. So I think in large Millie Maker style tournaments, potentially a Mims captain Flacco flex is in play, but it's in play. It's not something I'm going crazy on. I just think that maybe people underrate the fact that he's a starting quarterback. And like you said, 220-2 is in the range of outcomes. His defense maybe gets a little bit too much credit for how good they were last year compared to this year. But yeah, he's a bad quarterback, and you're just hoping to get 100, 90, 200, and a touchdown or two.
All right. Some people asking about fantasy cruncher settings. That's something that you can get here at Awesemo as an add-on via the sign-up pages. One deal I do want to mention, we do have the Masters coming up. We're about 72 hours away, 85 hours away, something like that. Math is escaping me at the moment, which it shouldn't, but it was a long day at the day job. But we do have promo code Augusta, which will give you 50% off the 1-week Awesemo Premium Platinum Package, which gives you access to everything at Awesemo. League of Legends, CSGO, we've got obviously golf, NFL, and all the good stuff that's behind the paywall. Half price for 1 week. Gets you 4 days of the Masters. And you know what would be something? If we had a day 4 Millie Maker contest for Augusta. I wouldn't put it past DraftKings. We'll see. All right, let's look at Fantasy Cruncher. So people are asking me some of the settings. So on a 3-game slate, I'm willing to let up to 3 players go against my defense, particularly in a game like this where I am not scared of anybody because there is nobody terrifying. This is me looking at the Monday through Thursday slate. The Thursday game is going to be Tennessee at Indianapolis at Tennessee. So not a lot that we're looking for, but I wanted to point out that on short slates, I like to use the higher number of players against my defense just for some differentiation. I only set a uniques of 2, and I'll continue to utilize randomness of 50 in the pro setting. If you don't have the advanced pro setting, I usually go between 10 and 15%. Those are my personal preferences. You want to play around with this. The more randomness you use, the more uniques you use, the wider your player pool is going to get, and the unintended lineups that come out from it can be pretty ugly, especially on a slate like tonight. If all of a sudden you're looking down and you've spent $41,000 of your 50 on DK, you may want to rethink things. Just saying, there's some pretty bad plays out there tonight, unlike those highfalutin showdown games that we all dream of. All right, running backs, the Frank Gore, Samaje Perine age difference, almost as big as our age difference, Kyle. 16 years there for Gore and Perine. And I'm sure I said Samaje, LaMichael Perine. They're cousins, as is
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Miles Jack is their other cousin.
Wait, Miles Jack is a cousin with the Perines?
Yes.
No kidding.
Here we go. Yes, Perine is cousins with Samaje Perine and Miles Jack. There you go.
I like Miles Jack.
No stone unturned for you
athletic.
gamers.
He's athletic. He's not on the slate. But yeah, in terms of Perine Gore, this is a running attack that has been absolutely dreadful. Even when they have probably good talent, Le'Veon Bell in the backfield, it has not translated to really any production. So when you scale down, I would assume when you scale down the talent, you could, honestly, you could throw an argument to me that Le'Veon Bell just isn't talented anymore. I would at least have to listen. But, regardless of that, when you assumedly scale down the talent, there has been really little production from Frank Gore and Perine. Perine missed, at least, I believe he missed game 1 and was kind of limited in his first few games with an injury. And so right now, Frank Gore leads the team with, I think it's 7 red zone carries. It's nothing. They hardly play in the red zone because they're god awful, but does lead the team. I believe it's 7-3 versus Perine. But again, Perine has kind of been scaled up more as of recently. I believe he's played on over 40% of the snaps. I think it's 49% or more of the snaps in the past 3 games, whereas Frank Gore has kind of been on a downward trajectory in the past 3 games. That doesn't surprise me. Round 4 pick, obviously he's not a crazy high pick, but high day 3 capital in Perine, whereas Gore obviously comes in as just a veteran presence who can execute the plays, but doesn't offer you any upside, especially in the long term. So obviously this team is completely dusted. They stand no chance at, winless, stand no chance to make the playoffs. It would make sense for them to get a rookie running back more involved in the system, even, just to see what he offers you. And in the past few weeks, that's been the case. He also offers more as a pass catcher. I believe he's had multiple targets in 3 or 4 straight games. So I think Perine actually makes a decent amount of sense. I'm probably still not getting too crazy on him, if much at all, in captain, but in the flex, he'd be my preferred play because if they are going to be, at a deficit in this game, which seems likely, seems like they'd be passing to him more than they would be passing to Gore. And at this point, it's probably also in the ballpark of a 50-50 split in terms of just the overall carries. So I kind of like Perine. I think he's just, he's sort of like the Leonard Fournette of this slate, where he projects to be the pass catcher and get a decent amount of work as the runner. Now, is his team a favorite? No. And does his team suck? Yeah, they're pretty bad. But on the slate, neither of the offenses are awfully impressive. So I think Perine's a guy I'm actually going to be over the field on, especially on the off chance that split continues to grow. What if he gets 60 to 70% of the backfield carries and almost all of the backfield targets? I think that's in the range of outcomes. So for that reason, and I don't really see that happening for Frank Gore, because things have not been trending in the right direction for Frank Gore. So Perine is a guy who, based on the potential upside of simply getting 60, 70% of the carries and 70, 80% of the backfield targets, I think his upside is definitely worth paying for and worth going to Perine over Gore specifically. Don't have a lot of Gore and have a lot of Perine for that reason, because if there's one back I want, it's the pass catcher and potentially the leading rusher. Who knows?
All right. We've hit on it like 16 different ways for their wide receivers here, but just officially for those of you that are jumping in here, Chris Hogan and Josh Doxson both out, Vincent Smith out as well. Crowder should be back from his groin injury. We've mentioned that a bunch of times. He's kind of the number 2 guy of the night. Rashard Perriman's cleared from the concussion protocol. Jeff Smith, Braxton Berrios, probably the odd guys out, with Denzel Mims, yep, as Kyle was mentioning, probably will be the number 3 receiver. The reason Berrios is kind of the odd man out, he mostly plays in the slot, which is where Jamison Crowder plays. Crowder, no great shakes, but he is probably their most polished receiver at this point. And we know Flacco, for his big arm, he is kind of captain check down as well, and not as accurate with the big arm. So we'll see. What does that do for Chris? I am a disappointment, Herndon. He actually changed his name legally. Over the last 3 games, he has 3 targets. Ryan Griffin and Trevon Westco fill out the remaining 20 to 25% of the snaps. They have 10 total targets this season. This position is a wasteland.
Yeah, I mean, what a disappointment. There was so much hype around Chris Herndon, too. And he did, I mean, like, supposedly he had, like, just simply a good training camp on film, or whatever you make of that. And then his rookie season was, like, one of, like, the top 15 or 20 rookie seasons for a tight end in the past decade or two. And simply none of that matters. He has been downright awful. And even in the past 3 weeks, his routes run have been trending down. I believe through the first 5 weeks, he averaged, like, 25 routes run. It's kind of been scaled back to less than 20 routes run per game in the past 3 games. And like you said, averaging, like, a target per game in the past 3 games. I think all of those might have come last week. If not, it was at least 2 last week. So it seems like at this point, he's basically just a blocker who runs a handful of routes and is like the 3rd or 4th read on those routes. He's not even that good, too. So I think he's fine as a punt play. And now his price, which I believe is $1,600, it's commensurate with his role, but that's it. He's a punt play because he's a tight end who is on the field a lot and hardly ever gets targeted, and his routes are even trending down. So no interest in him. Jamison Crowder, very, very, very clearly the number 1 receiver on this team, double-digit targets in all of the games he's played, over 100 yards in 3 of them. I think the big split, which is kind of on the Jet side, almost the entirety of the focus on how you should be deciding how you're building lineups, is what do you see the split between Rashad Perriman and Denzel Mims being? I mean, Denzel Mims, we don't really have a good sample on Rashad Perriman with Mims in the line. I don't think we have any. In the past 2 weeks, I think Rashad Perriman missed 1 week and then probably missed a portion of another week with the concussion. So we don't really have even a full game with those 3. In the past 2 weeks, Denzel Mims, I believe 10 targets, 42 yards in each of those games, I believe. And he's like running a decent amount of routes. And he's a guy who they spent significant draft capital on, whereas they spent, I believe, a 1-year deal on Rashad Perriman. It's a team that they don't have a long-term investment in Perriman versus Mims. Mims now getting a decent amount of looks. I would say that for me, I think Mims was a pretty high ADOT, and Perriman probably not a short ADOT guy either. But Mims getting a decent amount of work in the past few weeks. They have the draft capital behind him, and there's really no incentive for them to not try and get him the ball as much given their situation, which is that nothing matters anymore. They should be trying to scout the talent within their own team. I think Mims is my preferred play of the 2. I think both are fine. Mims specifically for me, but both act as good leverage off of Crowder, who deserves to be highly owned, but anything can happen on an individual showdown slate. If you say play Mims the captain, which I might have some of, and he catches 1 or 2 long balls, those are entire drives that Crowder doesn't get 2 to 3 targets on that drive. So I like Mims as a leverage play. I think Perriman fits that same bill. It's just that if I'm picking one of these guys, I'm going to go with Mims because of his recent involvement and their incentive to play him.
Yeah, and that absolutely makes total sense. Some would say that is keeping it 100. Come on, Joe. There we go. It took Jordan a minute behind the glass to get that one. Just seeing if you're still paying attention. All right, I see someone in chat is asking who is the best contrarian captain, or I guess it would be MVP option on FanDuel. Let me tell you two things. One, it is anybody not named Cam Newton. And two, we have free Showdown slate player ownership projections tonight. So I'm going to drop those in there. We are kind of at our, I guess, game theory question asking phase. We have 18 minutes until lock. This is a sort of confusing slate, meaning there are just timeshares abounding everywhere, and that's going to make it hard. Plus, we have two quarterbacks that don't really want to throw. We have one adequate defense, and then we have one disaster of a defense. But as we saw last night, and as we saw with the Dallas Cowboys, any given Sunday or Monday, some Thursdays, and the occasional playoff game on Saturday. That wasn't in the inches speeches, but Al Pacino's giving me a little leeway there. What do you want to do here? What is your biggest thing you want to impart for people on lineup building without using? Well, no, let's do it this way. You're using Cam. Oh, somebody asking, why am I not putting cash lineups out there? Because we're all going to have the same lineup. So I'm not going to do that today because I just think it's silly at this point. But if you are playing Cam Newton, how are you going to differentiate your lineups in a way? Let's talk 250-man field, and then let's talk the Big Daddy fields.
Yeah, so in very, very small fields with Newton in the lineup, I think maybe the biggest way to get different would be to fade Crowder, which I don't want to fade Crowder, but especially I guess the question started off with the context of FanDuel. And as a guy who gets a ton of targets, but I believe his ADOT is at 8 this year, which is quite low for any receiver. It's like, that Jarvis Landry tier or whatever. I think Crowder on FanDuel makes sense as the biggest fade, especially if you're playing Newton. If you're not playing Newton, you have a lot of liberty because we're getting, again, 40+% ownership at MVP on FanDuel. So if you're not playing him, you can probably stand to get a little more neutral with how you build your lineups. If you are playing him, I think fading Crowder and probably even Flacco is probably the way to go, banking on like a Denzel Mims long one, or even Brashad Perriman. I think both are completely fine. The same with like a P. Ryan. I would just say if you're playing Newton, it is so difficult to build a unique lineup by playing Newton at captain and Crowder in the flex. If you are not, Damian Harris, interesting. I don't love him, especially his price on DraftKings specifically, I think is quite egregious, just how much ahead of some other players he is. On FanDuel, when you get a little bit more liberty with your price, I think Damian Harris at captain or at MVP specifically is not that awfully disinteresting, has 2 games over 100 yards in his 4 starts, and does have some touchdown potential just given that he will operate as maybe not the unquestioned lead back, but is probably the 1A back on a team that is favored by upwards of double-digit points. I think Damian Harris, if this team is going to dominate time of possession, dominate plays run in this game, which the Jets give up above average time, or they give up like second most time possession, they give up above average plays run to their opponents. You could see Damian Harris being on one of the 5 run heaviest teams in the NFL, getting 17 to 20 carries, 120 and a touchdown. Doesn't offer much as a pass catcher, but on FanDuel, you're not as concerned with that. So 100 yards and a touchdown in a game that doesn't feature a lot of scoring could make him, like it makes him, that potential makes him my favorite leverage point off of Cam Newton. And obviously touchdowns that Damian Harris scores are touchdowns that, unless they're a pass catching touchdown, which I don't think he has multiple catches in a game this year, or I guess probably in his career even. So a rushing touchdown for Damian Harris is a rushing touchdown that Cam Newton doesn't score. So makes a great leverage play in that way. It's difficult to find leverage on FanDuel because Cam Newton is just such a good play, but Harris would be that guy for me. And if you're playing Harris in those, 250, 1,000 mans or whatever, I would say in that range, you play Newton, you play all the good plays, and you probably fade Crowder, because if you're playing Newton and Crowder, you really struggle to find any leverage on the slate.
All right. I see in chat, News God is saying serviceable for I'm paraphrasing, serviceable for Flacco. That might even be hard to get behind.
It might be.
News God, come on.
Show a little love.
Show a little love. All right. We've got, so Mike, hold on, let me find this, because Mike Loshpo is asking, how can you say that dude's going to get 20 carries? Let me explain. We're coming up with the theory on how we can build a lineup that will be unique enough if we're playing Cam to make it a little bit different. We don't know that he had 16 carries on 20 plays last year. We don't know that he's going to play 20 plays. This is a Bill Belichick offense. He has the absolute chance to screw everybody on a really bad island game. Some would call it shitty. He lives for this. He has to. He's completely aware of what he's doing.
Yeah, for Harris, I mean, he has a game of 16 carries and a game of 17 carries, both of which were in games they lost. I know the Buffalo game, they were like close and hanging in there, but ultimately, if you're going to be facing negative game scripts, like you wouldn't expect to see a lot of carries. So the fact that he can get within 4 or 3 carries of 20 total in games which they lost, imagine a game in which they win by 10 points. And that is just the median projection. Vegas has that as the middle of the range of outcomes. Imagine if they go out and destroy, which teams have no problem doing. Imagine if they go out and destroy the Jets, they win by 20 plus. Absolutely, he can get 20 carries. Do I have that as his median projection outcome? No, absolutely not. But do I think in a game like it would be their first win in, I believe, 5 or 6 weeks, do I think in a game where we see Damian Harris operate as the clear 1A and they have a, touchdown lead from 10 minutes in onward, could he get 20 carries and, maybe even a catch or two? Probably not, but maybe. Absolutely. And that's what I think is important. It's not saying that I think the most probable outcome is that Damian Harris gets 20 carries, a rushing touchdown, and 125 yards. Obviously not. I think the median outcome would be like 14 carries, 60 yards, and not a touchdown, obviously. Probably maybe 0.4, 0.5 of a touchdown. Yeah, that's probably the median outcome. But I'm not looking for the median outcome. I'm looking for the outcome that pays off the most money relative to its odds of hitting. And given that on both sites, but this was in the context of FanDuel, if half of the field or close to it is going to be playing Cam Newton at captain, and I can find ways to leverage that, I know that Damian Harris has 5 to 10% chance of hitting. But if he hits, do I pay off more than that 5%, like 5 to 10%? No, I'm like live to take down the millie or whatever. So I think you are looking for spots that basically, in the shortest words, pay out more than their odds of hitting. And I think Damian Harris, in the context of FanDuel, where his reception totals shouldn't matter and the 100-yard bonus shouldn't matter, I think is one of the best plays in that context. If I think his odds of hitting are greater than the public expects, that means he's a plus EV decision essentially.
Okay, we had a few people asking for rules. Let me go over quickly. This is the settings I have for rules. I better enable them all. I have my kicker and defense rule. All kickers, all defenses, flex and captain. I'm only going to play 2. I think you could probably even say 3 tonight. I mix those. Some people say I'm only going to play 1 kicker. I'm only going to play 1 defense at the most. I just put them all in a pile and let it roll. Jets running backs, I am only going to play 1 no matter what. But I see somehow Brashard Perryman is in there as one of my running backs. Let's remove him. That should be P. Ryan. I must have typed that. Oh, I see. I misclicked on him. Okay. So I have put in captain and flex. I'm only going to play 1 Jets running back. I just don't think they can both get there realistically for a tournament winning score. Patriots running backs. I'm doing the same thing. At most I'm going to play is 1. I may have to relax that. I'm running out of players. The Super Cam lineup has his tight ends and wide receivers and White and Burkhead in there. I'm requesting it to play at least 1 with him. The Wacko for Flacco has all of his tight ends and receivers. I'm requesting it to play 1 with them. I have not hit crunch yet, so I don't know if this is going to work with all of those rules in play. But that's where we are with that one. Reminder, we've dropped it in the Slack chat a couple of times, or the YouTube chat, but the free item today is the single game ownership. I'm going to drop that in. You want to jump behind the paywall for a full week of premium all access, including the Masters. Promo code Augusta will get you in. The 1-week platinum package is half off when you use the promo code Augusta in honor of the Masters, which starts Thursday. This deal expires on the 13th. Ooh, Friday the 13th. Interesting. Friday the 13th in 2020. Do we even get out of bed? I'm not sure.
No, we drink a lot the night before and try and sleep through it. Can I sleep like 28 hours or whatever? We got to get through that.
All right. And for those of you who wanted to play me in cash, my optimal, aka the Chalk Donkey lineup tonight on DK is Newton and captain, Crowder, Flacco, Burkhead, Castillo, and Ryan Izzo. I know a lot of people are going with Gunnar Olszewski, but
Olszewski.
God, was doing better without.
You got it in the first night. You got it in the first like 5 minutes of the show.
I ran
Get you back
on
track.
Or as my piano teacher used to say, you got to practice, Eric. At some point, you run out of talent. Yeah, doesn't take that long. But that's a reminder that Sam Ficken is not playing tonight. Folk was also dealing with a back injury. He was questionable. The Patriots listed 17 people as questionable in a record for this season so far. So we're not going to be that worried about him. They didn't do anything to activate anybody or bring anybody else in. So I'm not that worried about it. But that's your chalky lineup, the way to get away from it. That was me going Flacco saying he's going to touch the ball on every play. If you wanted to tweak it with Damian Harris, I think it will get even more chalky. You could potentially go with who's the receiver I'm forgetting?
Jacoby Myers.
Yes,
or
thank you. It'd be Myers, and then you would upgrade Izzo probably to one of the kickers. Those are going to be the three most common builds, and then you'd run a double kicker lineup.
Yeah, so we should talk. I don't think we've talked about the top receiver splits in New England, and we've got a few minutes. People can still tweak their lineups. I mean, we've still seen Damiere Byrd in the past 2 weeks, which I believe are the 2 weeks we've seen Myers kind of take the field as the number 2 receiver. They basically split routes perfectly. I think it's 63-60 in favor of Byrd, but Myers, I believe, has 16 targets on the back of like a 10 target or close to it game in the past 2 games. It's kind of been Byrd's calling card, as he is on the field running a ton of routes, but they seem to throw to every other one of their receivers over him. That was the case. Like, he was running more routes, I believe, than Julian Edelman. Obviously, Julian Edelman saw more targets than him up until the week 4 game, where I believe it was Byrd had 10 targets. Since then, it has been a peak of, I believe, 4 targets. That's not awfully surprising. I think that is kind of the targets per route run is somewhat of a mix of usage and just ability to get open. He's like a fringe practice squad level player. And I guess so is Myers, but shouldn't be surprising that Byrd doesn't get targeted a lot, even if he is on the field a lot. So despite the price hike, I am still more interested in Myers based on the past 2 weeks of data, a small sample admittedly, saying that he's getting more targets, and he also has a slightly larger ADOT, which means he should be getting more yards on those targets. Has maybe some more volatility, but it's also a minor difference. The price is maybe the one point you could argue. I mean, obviously it's in favor of Damiere Byrd, but I think just what we've seen from Byrd on the entire season is that when he's on the field, other players are going to get targeted at a higher rate than him. So as a price play, obviously he makes more sense, but I think Myers should operate as the number 1 receiver. Like, James White basically should be the number 3 receiver. He doesn't, in the past 2 weeks, he's run just as many routes, or maybe one more. Although I think it's just as many. As Rex Burkhead has one more target, I believe. Like, we see running quarterbacks not throw to receivers or to receiving pass catching backs a lot. That has seemed to be the case with James White largely. So not a ton of interest in James White. I think Rex Burkhead, for the price, running just as many routes in the past 2 weeks, is probably the better play, because if he's going to run as many routes, get not too far off from him in targets, and get more chances as a running back. I think Rex Burkhead, as the pass catching backs go, is my favorite play. And Myers is a slight lean, but the price kind of makes it close to even. Still a slight lean towards Myers, though. Any discrepancy? Like, I could be argued to switching all of my Myers lineups to Byrd before lock, because I don't think there's a big difference between these two guys.
I'm still leaning towards Byrd for the same. Pardon me, Myers for the same reason. Byrd a little bit, but so much of it was that 1 10-target game. Yeah, and that part just makes me a little bit afraid. What are you doing for 5-1s, 1-5s? Is that worthwhile tonight?
So I think 5-1s are always on the table, because anytime we see a blowout, it becomes, or even in a game where maybe not the worst of blowouts, but just the way things break on a random, football's so random that even if 2 teams keep it close, the scoring could be condensed on one side and non-condensed on the other. I think 5-1s are essentially always in play. 1-5s, I think, probably hit at a lower rate than they are rostered at. So I generally don't have a ton of interest in 1-5s. I think the interesting thing might be 2-4s. So I think I saw someone ask about early in the chat. I hope they're still in here, because it was way early in the chat and we haven't talked about it. 2-4s on the Jet side, because 1, Crowder gets so much volume, and 2, I think people are going to be so hesitant to roster Jets because they're god awful. They are truly one of the worst football teams in recent years. Like, when did the Browns go winless that year? The winless Browns or whatever, the winless Lions team, they're up there with
Detroit did. Yeah, I don't think the Browns ended up.
The Browns not get winless. They deserve to. They were terrible. They didn't.
Well, they should have.
They're up there with those teams. But anything could happen on an individual slate, just like we saw with the Saints coming in as underdogs and absolutely immolating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So for that reason, I think people underestimate the variance that occurs within an individual NFL slate. And I think even if that means you still play more of the New England Patriots because Cam Newton, even if he has a terrible game, is a good play because of his rushing volume. Their kicker could get involved, obviously. They have guys who could just get there on receiving volume, let alone not scoring a touchdown. And they have some value plays like a Ryan Izzo or Rex Burkhead. I think 2-4s are very much in play. I have some 2-4s just because I think people underestimate the viability, especially if the offense ends up being concentrated, of a Jamison Crowder, Joe Flacco, Jamison Crowder, Michael P. Ryan, or a Jamison Crowder Jets kicker lineup. So, I mean, Jamison Crowder being featured in all of those. I also think Denzel Mims is in play because it only takes a few plays of him to get, in at least the optimal lineup, maybe not the captain. So I think people just simply underestimate the variance. And they say, 2-4 doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would I play, the team that is losing? Why would I play Jets and captain? Why would I play only two of them? They're likely to play Jets and captain. I think it comes in more as a 3-3, whereas I think the difference between like 2-4 and 3-3 probably isn't that large, especially in the context of Jamison Crowder potentially dominating this offense. And I don't think people see it that way. I think that's just a place where my view on variance in an NFL game differs from the public. And if that view is correct, which given a large sample, there's a lot of variance, I think that view is correct. So I'm going to be playing more of these seemingly weird, but I don't think they're that weird, 2-4, potentially 5-1 kind of lineups.
All right, get 2.5 minutes left. I'm scrambling to get in my lineups. You guys should clearly be doing the same. Let's see. I wanted to make sure my main lineup is in a few of these. We got no pressure, but pressure makes diamonds here. Reminder, we're going to jump off tomorrow again with NFL shows. I believe we will be doing the waiver wire show?
Waiver wire show should drop like tomorrow afternoon. We pre-record it so we can get everything nice and tight. But it should be sometime late tomorrow afternoon.
All right, which is going to be important because we're going to be wanting to put in waiver claims, getting us into the week 10. Week 10? It's week 10 already? This hurts. What happened to our season, Kyle?
We're getting there. We're getting there. I don't, like, you're talking about like PGA and, MLB. Like, I don't follow a ton of other sports. So it's going to be I don't know about boring, but interesting off season.
Well, hopefully it will, we get there. And I'm uploaded. Okay. Always makes me panic there. Nothing like waiting until the last minute, but at least I built out all my rules and had everything there. Sir Dave says normally at this time he's going to say, let's get ready to rumble, but tonight it could be just a little tussle. We'll see. Hey, maybe we'll get some fireworks. We had there was one other game that we thought was going to be crappy. Was it the Cleveland?
No, it was probably Jets Denver was supposed to be. I mean, that game featured backup quarterbacks at least on I think that was the first time we saw Joe Flacco, and both teams ended up scoring at a pretty decent clip. That was like a Thursday night game 4 or 5 weeks ago that smashed the over. I would assume it couldn't have had a good over under. And there's a lot of points in that game, and it featured the Jets.
All right, Greg J says we turn in for the EMac scramble. You would be surprised how many people mentioned to me, thank you for doing that. I kind of see what you do when you're under sheer terror across your face. It's like, especially you'd see, I'm glad I'm not on there Sunday morning. You get like $1,200 out there and you're like, please upload. And fortunately, it usually works out. Not always, though. Not always. Always have a good shell lineup. That is key. Or next week, I think we have 5 afternoon games, if I remember correctly. So kind of one of those nice slates. We get about 3 of those a year. So we have some extended action. Plus, you've got the Rams and Seahawks squaring off in the afternoon game. That should be a fun one. I don't know about you, Kyle, but I'm ready for a little bit of dinner. It could be time for some pizza, perhaps. Some nice, what are we going to have? Maybe some sausage chicken, a little broccoli on it. That's right.
Broccoli on pizza. It's strange. You're getting a little freaky.
When you make it at home, just the extra cheese. Don't need that tomato sauce. We have a little bit of fun. It's just a vehicle to get that chorizo sausage coming right at you. So
all right.
That's what I like to hear. But with that, you can follow us at Awesemo_COM. You can follow me at EMac DFS. You can follow Kyle at Kyle Tweets. Here, with that, gamers, good luck.